Morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the ARES Strategic Mining Investor Presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, attendees will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please feel free to type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during today's meeting. However, the company can review all questions and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll, and I'm sure the company will be most grateful for your participation. And I'd now like to hand over to CEO James Walker. Good afternoon.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mark. Actually, it's giving me those same polling questions. Let me just scroll through those. Okay, there we go. Hi, I'm James Walker. I'm the CEO of ARES Strategic Mining, and I'd like to walk you through our project and how it's going, and the sort of the components that make up our project, and hopefully give you a good understanding of everything we've done, we're currently doing, and will be doing over the coming few months. And yeah, I hope it's something we're excited about. So hopefully we can communicate that excitement to everybody who's watching now. It's funny, but obviously, if there's a gold mine, you would never start with a slide on what gold is, but it's necessary for fluorspar. Obviously, I think a lot of shareholders are probably familiar with what fluorspar is, and I'll try speed through these slides so we can get to questions, which is probably more what people are interested in doing. But just to give people a bit of a background who don't know, fluorspar is a industrial mineral. And it's classified as such because it's used in the manufacture of lots of industrial items such as steel, aluminum, hydrofluoric acid, fluorine, lithium-ion batteries, cement, the glass industries. It's one of the most ubiquitously used industrial minerals in the world. And just to add to the strangeness of the situation, it's 100% imported into the United States at the moment. And this is despite the fact that it's also classified as a critical mineral, which means it's vital to the economic security of the country. So despite that, we have this big foreign dependence on this very, very valuable resource. And we need a lot of it. We need hundreds of thousands of tons, if not millions of tons of this stuff on a year just to keep industry ticking along. And currently, I think a lot of the demand for this is being driven by the emergence of lithium-ion batteries, where you need fluorspar for the anode, the cathode, and the electrolyte as well. So it's extremely important, and particularly in the chemical industry, even just the manufacture of hydrofluoric acid is very important in a lot of other processes to do with the industry. So even the creation of non-related acids like sulfuric acid requires hydrofluoric acid. So it's a very important thing. It's very important to the US and every country who has big industry. And we're trying to set ourselves up to be the only domestic US producer of this mineral. So just to give a bit of a background about how we got here and what we're currently doing at the moment. We didn't actually start with the intention of doing fluorspar. We started with the intention of trying to find a project that was near to production or permitted, there was low capital costs to get it into production, and was relatively simple mining operation because otherwise you could start a mine and you'd need tens of millions to explore it and develop it, and then you need hundreds of millions of dollars for a processing plant, and the whole thing creates an unfeasible expectation around getting it there. Whereas we aim for something small and easy, and then you're obviously much more likely to succeed. So we identified fluorspar, this project, particularly because the people who were mining it were two old artisanal miners, and they were just basically taking it out of the ground and putting it into a bag and selling that to the steel mills. And it's pretty much unheard of in the mining industry to be able to do that, which means that the product that you're getting out of the ground is very close to a final product. And when we saw that, we bought out those two gentlemen and we went and staked the entire area. So we've now got about 6,000 acres of claims where all the showings were across the whole Spore Mountain district. So it's district scale project. And then we began development work. we started drilling, we did LiDAR, we did metallurgical work, we did geophysics, assaying, plant design, everything that you would normally do associated with building this thing up. And I think as we moved through the stages, it began to look better and better. Because one, you couldn't move across the mountain without tripping up over fluorspar showing it's just rising its surface. And so as we progressed, we realized that there was a mandate within the country to support critical mineral industries in the country. And so even though there was no direct grant money for this, I think it's a lot easier for politicians to talk about wanting to bring back industries, but getting a bill passed is much harder. But they still put us in touch with the US Department of Agriculture, who are looking to develop rural development areas and rural development projects. And we closed the financing with them. And we also got put in touch with the state of Utah that have a manufacturing bond to promote the domestic industry within the state. And that was a $10.5 million bond we closed there. As with that cash, we went out and bought 50-acre industrial estate with buildings. We'd already purchased a plant. That plant came in and it's under construction at the moment. Concrete's been poured. The foundations are all done. Steel is going into the ground, and the plant is already fabricated. The lumps plant, the first plant, is already fabricated and assembled at site, and so it just needs to be slotted into the steel structure. And alongside that, we brought in a mining group to develop the mine, and now we bought all the heavy equipment, so the loaders, the dozers, the excavators, all of that kind of stuff. So all of the heavy equipment we need is already there. And they've even started, they've already started like a couple hundred feet deep now into the mine. It's a few more 100 feet and then we intersect ore. And so we really are just a few months off now from actually being able to take that ore out of the ground and stick it into the plant. And both the mine and the plant are sort of timed to coincide together, so we can finally get that revenue out of the company, and then it should be self-sustaining at that point. And again, that money's been spent very prudently. It's only gone on capital infrastructure, capital items, and we've tried to keep our overheads extremely low. So we might even hold the record when we finally get to production of like doing the least amount of capital raises to get the project into production. And it's just a bit of an overview about the global market. So in America, in terms of raw fluorspar exports on an annual basis, they import something in the region of about 600,000 tons. But actually, if you look at all the downstream products as well that include that fluorspar that can't be produced domestically, it really does balloon up to a couple million tons of fluorspar and fluorspar downstream products that get brought in. So obviously very critical to the industry. And if you think about how much steel the US produces as an example, like 80 million tons or something like that, and each ton requires 20 pounds of fluorspar, and each ton of aluminum requires 60 pounds of fluorspar, you can begin to get an understanding of how important this stuff is. It's interesting because the US did actually used to have a big fluorspar industry, and it got destroyed when China was industrializing because they were just mining high-grade pits, and they were flooding the market with cheap produce, and that killed the domestic industry. But China, since then, has actually gone from a net exporter to a net importer, and that's obviously constrained supply chains quite dramatically. And it's causing a lot of issues. And there's now a spike in price in fluorspar, which is great for us. Like I wouldn't complain about that. But it's being caused essentially by a drive towards electric vehicles, solar panels, things like that. At the same time as more and more countries need this, and there are very few big suppliers. The US does get some of its produce from Mexico, but even then, it's really only comes down to one mine down there, the Las Huevas mine, which can produce a lot. But even then, recently they found that the grades have been fairly inconsistent and has had fairly high arsenic content, and so really US industry is really hunting for a domestic supply of this mineral, and obviously that's us. So the good part here is that there's a lot of blue sky potential for us, and obviously we put this into production. We'll build up the mine, we'll build up the operation, and we'll try and ramp up as best we can over the next few months and the years. But the good part is the expansion potential is there. So investing now, obviously we can, once we hit that revenue and it's increasing and it's getting more stable and output is becoming more, we can expect a very decent appreciation over time, which should be a general upward trend. And we have a lot of things on our favor. Obviously, I've mentioned that we're going to be the only domestic supplier, but it's also coming at a time when international relations are becoming more strained. And certainly, I don't see the relationship with Russia and China improving anytime soon. And they are producers of this mineral, and they're going to be competitors for this mineral too. And in some areas of the world, such as Africa, they actually have more sway there. They're actually more able to bring in that material and beat the US for actually purchasing it out. And we have major advantages over other competition, even internationally, because the OPEX is very low, the grade is very high, unusually high, and the impurities are very low. Very few sulfides, very few arsenic, and so the amount of processing we need to do and the amount of staff that need to be involved in this is very low. So we have big advantages in that area too. And with all of these mandates that are coming in from governments about decarbonizing, that's only in our favor. It's only going to work in our favor, and already that's manifested in a lot of big US companies coming to see us. And we recently signed a sales agreement with a big materials broker, a multi-billion-dollar firm that wants to buy everything we can produce, and they've even offered a forward sale of a couple $1 million. And we even have groups like Honeywell coming to visit our site, and they've already been through our data room, and they're very interested in taking this. Again, multi-billion-dollar big chemical firm, very dependent on acid spar for its operations, and again, a domestic supply. They obviously want that, and people are probably very familiar with Tesla and the way it operates business, but even then, it's very likely that at some point they're going to want a direct sales agreement for these materials that are inherent in their batteries. So the prospects are really pretty excellent. And one thing that gives us a tremendous amount of confidence too is that when we were starting this and we realized that the industry had been shipped overseas, and experts were kind of thin on the ground, we did actually reach out to a Thai-based company that was ran fluorspar mines in Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, and they were producing a couple 100,000 tons. But they were very useful for us. Like they advised on things like reagents, processing, plant design to try and de-risk the project for us. And we even ran our ore through their systems to know what we would get, so that when we had results and we sent them to these big partners like Kramer, ARES, or etc., they were representative samples of what we could expect out of a real plant, and not just SGS developed metallurgical work, which is actually more typical with putting a mine into production. So we know that the ore can be processed into a product that's wanted by industry, and we know the plants are going to work. And we bought 2 plants now that are going to be, one up and running in a few months, one that's going to be delivered for assembly in another few months. And once they both come online, then we'll be able to produce those 2 very desired product lines that can cater for both the metals industry, but also the chemical industry and the industries that require that higher grade. So a little bit about the team. My background, I'm a professional mining engineer, and even though it says on this presentation I'm registered with the PIGA as an engineer, that's out of date actually. I need to update that, but I'm a professional engineer. And even though he's not on this this management team. I should just quickly mention Bob Lee, one of our directors, who runs several fluorspar mines. And I was on site with him a couple of weeks ago, where we were going through the processing facilities, the mine, and all those kind of things. And it's a real asset actually having somebody who runs several fluorspar mines already. And a big benefit of that too is insight into the industry workings, what things are selling for, where the customers should be, where we should target, where certain grades of products could go. And that kind of knowledge we've inherited, it's been very, very useful. Victoria is the CFO, so as people probably realize, the backbone of things, how things work. I make decisions, but she keeps everything on track. And we've got two really wonderful geologists. One is the VP of Exploration with about 25 years of experience in geology. He already runs public companies himself, so he's obviously very experienced in this area. And Raul has about 20 years of experience as a geologist, but importantly, he was working on Europe's largest fluorspar mine, the Minerza Group. So he was an expert in fluorspar even before we got started with this. So if you, in terms of geological mapping and determining where the fluorspar is likely to be located, where the fault lines would be, he was an invaluable resource to get this going as well. So a bit about the company. We're obviously a junior mining company at the moment. We don't want to be a junior mining company. I don't think any junior mining company should want to stay a junior mining company. You should always be looking to move away from that. We were only a few months out from being a manufacturing company, and at that point, it becomes a very different beast with revenue and profits, and it will also give us obviously the fuel we need to expand appropriately. I think we're trading somewhere in the region of about 18 cents at the moment. But the important thing I think about the project generally is that it's been severely de-risked, and that little map just beneath, it's these three squares just show everything that we built up, the mining operation. As we've said, the tunnels are built now. It's been shotcreted, reinforced steel has gone in there, and all the mining equipment has been purchased, and it's sitting there ready to start digging out. We already have our rail spur where we're leasing it. We've revamped it. It's ready to start shipments. And then just at the bottom there, we've got our 50-acre industrial estate with buildings, with permitting to build the facilities that we want and just start processing. So it's really, in terms of a mining company or a junior mining company, it's as close as you can get to a manufacturing facility or manufacturing company without being one. So I can jump onto these questions first and try and fly through these, and just
let me just jump in there, James, just to give you a small break before we go into the Q&A. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for submitting the questions you have thus far. Please do continue to submit those questions just using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of the screen. And as I say, these questions will be published on the Investor Meet Company platform post today's meeting. You have received a number of questions throughout your presentation there, James, and you've also received quite a few ahead of today's event. So firstly, thank you to everybody for your engagement. What I might do, if I may, hand over to Carl, who will moderate through today's questions, and if I may just hand over to you at that time. Carl, over to you, sir.
Sure. Thanks very much. Actually, James, we're going to move on to some of the investor questions rather than the debt questions, just because we had such a big response. These are a little bit more topical. People are actually want answers to. So I thought you start you off with a couple softballs, just to get you warmed up. So we're kind of used to the image of a modern CEO and all their extravagance. So we're just wondering, in a junior mine like yours, what would a typical CEO's life be like? What does a typical day look like for you?
Well, I don't know why you used the word extravagance. I mean, if I take today for an example, I mean, I've still got small kids, so I was being woken up by them throughout the night. So I wake up tired, and then I get ready, and I get the bus to work, and I come down to the office and start working. typically I try and start early and I put the phone down just so I can work on actual, not actual work, but like the reports that need to be done, the writing up that needs to be done. And then obviously I start fielding things like questions and that sort of stuff. But there's usually some very key things that you need to get to on a daily basis. So we've got two project teams at the moment, the mining team and the construction team. So obviously checking with them about the day, the plan, how things are going, what staff members they're arguing with. That kind of thing is obviously very important. But like the days, to be honest, are quite long. So you get here early and you do leave quite late. And then obviously I just get back on the bus and then go home. And if I can do some exercise, great. If I can't, I just go to bed and get woken up by small kids again. So like until the weekend, and then I get woken up by small kids, but I try and sleep in despite them.
Good luck with that. One of the other questions was talking about information, being such an important part of decision making. How do you keep yourself informed? Where do you find your sources of information?
I mean, it really varies. I mean, I don't have actually any prescribed sources of getting any information. It can come from anywhere. To be honest, a lot of the time people will just write to me and tell me things. And to be honest, when you're quite embedded in the work, it's very easy to miss a lot. And so people will sometimes write to me with updates and news and that I have no idea about, because all I've been doing is just writing things or making decisions on that steel needs to be bought at that time and that needs to be shipped there and that thing can be sold. And so it can take you out of it. But discussions with other with trading groups are very interesting for industry insights, as well as I mentioned, speaking to producers. And actually, recently I was having some very interesting conversations with big chemical companies that were giving some insights into their industries. And it's actually stuff that's very difficult to find. But if you speak to the source, you can actually get a lot of very useful information and work out how to tailor certain things. Certainly to do with like grade control and that kind of stuff. And even a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to a guy, he was bringing up those assay guns. And he was giving me and I was just discovering new techniques to actually get more accurate assays at site before we deliver for certification purposes, before they get loaded onto the rail cars. So yeah, it's a cacophony of different routes. And actually you learn quite a lot, even the mining guys at the moment. I knew obviously a fair amount about mining, but just being involved in some of the engineering decisions that have gone into the ramp installation, together with the delineation drilling, you pick up quite a lot of information just from doing things, right? And I would say that that's probably as useful as just reading industry magazines and websites.
Thanks, James. And then over the last few years running the mine, you've been through some difficult world environments, COVID and the like. What have been some of the most difficult things you've had to deal with? And what would you say you've learned from that you're going to be able to help the company propel forward in the future with those lessons? Well,
obviously, COVID was annoying. It's not the biggest problem we had, actually. Well, it caused some big problems. I mean, when that did happen, like, as an example, Raul at the time, who was the VP of exploration, couldn't get into the States. He couldn't get in by plane, so he had to try and drive, and he got stopped at the border in British Columbia. So he drove to Alberta to try and get in that way. And then they blacklisted him for 2 years, and then we couldn't get him to the mine at all. So he was trying to run drill programs remotely. And obviously you're dealing with a situation where you can't operate normally. And even when we were deploying people to site, we weren't allowed to put them in hotels. We had to put them in individual caravans because they couldn't, or what they call RVs, because they couldn't share. And obviously that was a big pain in the neck. There are other things too, like during that time, there was a big backlog of shipping vessels off the port of Los Angeles, and we got stuck in that. So we got stuck at sea. And then the Port of Los Angeles was trying to charge us for occupying space on a ship while we were at sea. And they called me about it. I said, I don't want to be at sea. I was like,
that was the equipment you were trying to ship at the time?
That was the equipment. I was trying to ship a plant. So it was kind of an annoying time because you couldn't do anything without tripping over some weird rule that had just been made up. So that was really annoying. What else was a problem? One big thing that was quite annoying is that in 2021 we actually began to make quite a lot of progress in spite of all the restrictions, and things were actually looking up, and the share price was really flying up. And then we ended up being one of the top 10 performing companies on the TSX Venture, and that drew ire from the TSX Venture, and they halted us for 4 months to do a complete audit, and it just killed the momentum. And I to this day, like, I'm still upset about that they did that, because it stopped us being able to raise money at a much higher price, like 80 cents. And there was people who wanted to put in, and even institutions were talking to us about becoming involved, and it would have taken the whole thing right through. So we beat COVID, and then the venture exchange tripped us up. That was a pain. And another one, just quickly, I know everyone doesn't want to hear me whining too much, but the new administration, when they got in 2020, they put in a bunch of new laws that we weren't aware of. So we'd run a drill program in 2020, but the second one we did, there were new archaeological rules introduced. So when we got to site, we found out that there were some baked bean cans that were older than 50 years, which made them a relic, which meant the whole program had to be just suspended while we got an archaeologist out there to look at the baked bean cans and give us permission to proceed. So dumb things like that, very annoying. And of course, because of COVID, the financing routes that we'd set up in 2020 for the USDA and the bond, they effectively got shut down until 2023. So finally in 2023, we could close them and actually really start building much faster. So yeah, there are lots of unanticipated things I don't think you could have anticipated, but yeah, we'd be way further along if it had just been like, if COVID had never happened, we would have just flown. Like, it would have been very, very fast to get this thing going.
Good. Thanks, James. Just to speed things along, because a lot of questions coming in. Thanks, everybody, for your questions. One that keeps coming up is you recently announced a private placement, specifically to actually purchase those units. What would be involved for somebody, and what important information would they need to know?
Well, it's a non-brokered private placement. I mean, anybody. I think it's mostly Canadian investors that it's open to. In typical lawyer fashion, we asked them to make it available to everybody. But the subscription agreement looks like it's mostly for Canadians. But the raise itself is purchasing at 18 cents, but you get a full warrant with that, exercisable at 26 cents. But it's also a life exemption, which means it's immediately trading stock, so you don't have a hold period on it. So we actually, just before we announced the private placement, the stock was picking up, but I think the private placement, obviously, as it always does, bring it back down to the level of the raise. But obviously, as we clear this, it should get back to the momentum it was at before and pick up. So it should be a good win for everybody, because we're close to production, we're close to revenue, and the momentum was there before the private placement, and the warrant will be there at 26 cents too. So there's a potentially a good double win built in for this. And just to touch on it quickly, I mean, I didn't want to do the private placement, but the government financings cannot be used for the purpose of the mining. So to keep the mining guys going, we have to do a separate financing just to feed into what they're doing, which is why we opened it up, because obviously we need to get into war while the guys are building the plant. So.
Yeah, good. And just to follow on that a little bit, so you believe that the price drop was just a reaction to the private placement, that there was nothing fundamental that caused that dip?
No, actually, I mean, you can't really get more de-risked than this project. I mean, it's very well backed, it's very well funded, it's got all the equipment, it's got everything like that. I mean, all the fundamentals are actually really good. It's kind of typical when you do that kind of thing. I think we were even worried about it going over the mark where we could put it at 18 cents. But typically that's fairly standard, that the market will adjust to the private placement amount. But that only lasts as long as it's open, and then it can appreciate back. So it should start going right back to the same momentum as before.
There's a question here about competition. Are there competitors that you have be dealing with? And follow on to that question was, are there other, or will there be any other fluorspar mines that you know of in North America or Canada that may be coming online?
So in the US, the answer, I believe, is no. Like we've actually spoken to a couple of very small sort of mom and pop operations that do maybe a couple hundred tons or a few hundred tons a year. I mean, these are tiny things that are hand cobbed, and so they need a big revamp to do it. And so I think with US, we've not got it locked up, but like we're in the best position to lock it up. In Canada, there is a big fluorspar mine. It went into receivership in Newfoundland. That recently got bought by a group for, I think, $25 million. They've got quite a lot to do to revamp the pits, but like I don't think it's a bad project, actually. I think it's a pretty decent one because it's open pit. The grade's a lot lower than what we've got, and it needs a huge amount more capital. I would say probably $30 million for their pit. They probably need another 20 for roads and infrastructure and revamping. They probably need to put another $100 million into that. So they need deep pockets. But they're not exactly a competitor because a lot of their produce goes down the East Coast to like Rio Tinto's aluminum smelters and industries like that. Whereas being further in West, we're sort of nearer to other industries that would take our product much more readily. And the other reason is that we've actually spoken to them as well. And like there's, I think they're interested in, obviously I might get in trouble for saying it. I think they're interested in trying to consolidate North America. So at one point, maybe they'll even try and buy the company. We'll see. But like they'd have to go, that's a shareholder vote issue. That's not up to any of us. And everyone should win out. If they ever do anything like that, everyone should win. But we're just going to keep building. And I think for us, because there's no real competition in the US, targeting the big previous producing areas in the US, like the Kentucky and Illinois region, makes a lot of sense because we already know the facilities that are required. You know the mining type. We could take what we've done here as a blueprint and apply it there very, very fast. So I think we can tie up the US over the next few years pretty well. And we can create, whatever happens, we can create a pretty big company here.
Thanks, James. Just a note to everybody, fantastic response to questions. We're getting a lot of questions here live, and unfortunately we'll not be able to answer all of them. If we don't manage to answer it today on this call, somebody will be in response to you with an answer to your question. So keep those questions coming in, and we'll get them answered to either today or very shortly. Thinking about sales, your recent hires on your sales team, will they be seeking potential customers prior to completing the plant?
Oh no, they've got them already. So the Kramer Group, for instance, on the sales side of it, even though they're materials brokers, they're obviously, it's kind of an awkward thing with the US industry because their preference is actually to buy from materials brokers because it's actually less risky for them. Even if the material broker supplies, great. If he doesn't, they just go somewhere else. Whereas if they're tied to one project, then they're very reliant on that. And they don't have the versatility to jump around. But materials brokers then are in the boat of having to secure those arrangements. So for things like steel industry, groups like the Kramer Group are really quite important because they'll only operate through them and then the mines will only operate through them. But they know exactly who they're going to sell to because we've already sent them samples. We've already sent them specifications. They've already approved those things, which is why they visited the mine and they signed an agreement to pay us that forward sale of $2 million. So yeah, on that front, it's They know where it's going, and they know how much they need. The good part is that no matter how much we ramp up, they'll take everything we can produce, because the US industry requirements are far in excess of what we can produce. So.
Yeah, and since you kind of first set foot on what you expected, you've talked about finding more pipes. How much bigger is the project than you initially thought? And is it too early, or could you give us an idea of the potential lifespan of the project?
So this is a bit fun to talk about as well, because obviously we have the permitted area where we're putting that ramp installation now. But like the funny thing about that is as soon as you start putting drill holes into the ground, you keep hitting new deposits, because it's even though it's a weird structure, we had 3 pipes that we identified that we wanted to mine, and we had 1 ramp installation that was going to have offshoot adits. What actually happened was, as we were doing the delineation drilling for the dimensions of that ramp, we hit ore that was connecting those pipes. So even though they were non-contiguous pipes, at depth they joined up, so it actually became one very large mining operation. And that's something we can expect to be fairly typical right across the range, because these things have to emerge from somewhere. So in terms of blue sky potential, we know the next area we want to mine. That's the Bell Hill claims to the south of the Spore Mountain, because they have a lot of pipes in a very concentrated area, which by themselves, which is how you have to plan for these things, is enough for put a ramp installation is and extract from these pipes. Being on the Lost Sheep area where the permitted mine is, it's very obvious that these things will link up. So as we develop that area, it's very likely that'll turn into a much larger ore body that we can take out. But just on a blue sky potential, if you're looking at when we took the whole project to an independent engineering firm, they looked at how many pipes we'd identified through geophysics, LiDAR, all that kind of thing. And they looked at the sort of historic production data, I can't remember the other geophysics software, and to work out that these things typically give you between 25,000 to 400,000 tons each. But even then, they took all of those showings, just those showings, not the ones subsurface, and then they halved it and halved it again, and they were still getting a 20-year mine life. Now, obviously, some of these pipes will be isolated and so not worth going for. But the good part here is that it's very likely that the fault that links all of these, that we gave birth to all of these things, does intersect its surface at one point, and so we will find out where that is, and then there should be a big chunk of fluorspar that is going to be that we can just mine for many years, just this one big chunk. And actually, we've got some groups looking into that information right now. They've got all the drill results, they've got all the fault lines, they've got all the mapping, and they're actually working with the university to work out where that chunk might most likely be. But we've already got our primary mine, our secondary mine, and I'd like that to be our tertiary mining site, big chunk, because then we just sit back and chuck it all out, and we've got tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of product there, so to last for years.
Yeah, we see the picture on the screen right now. That's a new portal. Thinking about that new portal, I had several questions. I'll try and cover most of them in this question. The money that you needed for this portal, this mine, does that get you to material depth for production, or is it the entire ramp? And then the second part of that question is, what is plan B with regards to needing funding? I guess that could be outside of the loans that you have from USD and the bond. Yeah,
so the first part is actually the money we're trying to raise at the moment is actually just to get the ramp into the ore. The way the ramp is designed is that it's actually going to intersect the same big ore body at 3 different levels. And so we have to hit the first level. Obviously, that gives us a lot of material to work with. And that material is going to be revenue generating. And then that is going to be paying for the development of the rest of the ramp installation. But actually, even after we hit that ore, because most of the heavy lifting is done, it's only another couple $1 million to complete that ramp installation, to get it all the way down to those two new intersecting levels. Because we've gone through the clay, we've gone through the portal, we put the steel structures in. Once we hit that initial ore in 3 or 4 months, we'll put the ventilation in, and then it's actually just ready to start taking it out of the ground. And the second part of the question is about further funding.
Yes.
Yes. So obviously the further funding I want here is our own revenue to begin generating this. But actually the good part about this is that obviously there's going to be a couple $1 million coming in from Kramer. But one of the good parts about this is that as soon as you shift from being a junior mining exploration company, which nobody really likes or wants to deal with, and you're producing revenue, you can borrow against income at that point if you want to put more advanced facilities in there. So I don't want to do any more dilutive financing. I just want to get more product out the ground and create more revenue. And so if we have to borrow against that money to put in a secondary mine site or a secondary adit or anything like that, that's what we can do. But we can do that when we're a manufacturing company. It's something we can't do at the moment. It's the how we're treated will change quite dramatically.
Yeah, thanks, James. One of the other questions was talking about if your production facility gets completed before the mine is finished, will you be able to use any of the tailings on the property to generate revenues?
So interestingly enough, with the tailings, even though it doesn't sound like it, that Delta is a small city where the processing plant is. But there's actually quite a lot of construction going on down there. I think generally a lot of small Western towns are getting a lot of influx from like fleeing Californians, and it's sort of driving up property prices and driving up a lot of construction in housing there. So the aggregate we actually produce is actually very suitable for a lot of that housing. So I haven't factored these sort of things into any of the projections or financials. But when the tailings start to be produced, one thing I'd really quite like to do actually is talk to the construction firms about buying or taking that aggregate, because they'll pay for it. Now we can obviously backfill pipes and build tailings dams, but I think as everybody can probably guess, like the benefit is selling it, and like there's a lot of aggregate that's needed for these things, and if it's in town, it's even better. And we're just piling it up because it's very inert. There's nothing deleterious in the tailings. It's very clean. You could just put it back into the ground. And actually, we've got even the Bureau of Land Management have signed off for us to be able to do that, because there's really it's a washing plant for fluorspar. Like you're just washing it clean, so you're not using any. It's not like gold where you need to use like chemicals that are pretty dangerous to the environment. So.
A lot of questions about the timing on the project.
Yeah,
we're now in May. Has the timeline changed? Because there were some kind of loose projections at the start of the year. Kind of being this far into the year, are you able to give us a better idea of when the company hopes to be in production?
Yeah, so obviously even we go off what the contractors tell us, and with the plant, actually, I admit I would have liked it to have been further along. We had a bit of a situation where, because there was a very unusually long winter, pouring concrete became, we either had to opt for a very expensive heating process to be able to pour the concrete in winter, and I didn't want to spend the money, especially when I saw that the mine would take a bit longer anyway. And so it seemed to me that I just wait out winter, so I didn't have to spend the extra cash. And then I could just coincide the plant construction with the mine construction. And obviously that made a lot of sense. But both teams now are really saying several months away. And like I get asked this question a lot, as you can imagine, and the lawyers are always cautioning me that I shouldn't give timelines away, but like I'm being told it's a few months away. If something happens, then something went wrong. But like really, actually most of the heavy lifting on both sides are done. Foundations are on the processing side are the hardest part to actually get done because of the concrete pouring, and we're in good weather now. And on the mining side, getting the whole thing cleared out, flattened, and the portal constructed, and then steel infrastructure, shotcrete, all that sort of stuff, that's all done. Actually, the heavy lifting is now done on both sides. It's just assembly at the processing site and digging at the mining site. I mean, it's pretty de-risked now. It should be much more smooth sailing than it's been. So.
Yeah, and kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, if you use the pun.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Or the fluorspar at the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
Yeah, even better. Can you provide more details in regards to the broker seals? I'm not sure if this was misheard, but $100 million advance payment. Can you give us a little bit more, if that's correct? That if I'm wrong, can you tell us a little bit more about that process? And is it something that you're thinking seriously about executing?
$100 million advance? What?
The question is asking about the brokered seals. So I guess it's the advanced purchase of fluorspar.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm not sure where this particular investor got that figure from, but if it's wrong, can you correct that? The advance payment. Are there advance payments, I guess, first of all? And is that something that you're considering executing?
Yes, I mean the prepayment, so the pre-sale is a real thing, and it might be $100 million over several years. Sure, like I mean, there's no shortage to how much we could sell this stuff. Well, of the amount we could sell this for over the next few years, it will amount to those amounts over time.
Do you have an offer currently that you can talk about, or?
So we do. So actually, we publicly released it in the document, and there were even pictures of us with the Kramer Group in the press release, because they obviously visited site, they did their due diligence, they took their geologists and engineers down there to investigate everything. But off the base of that, they signed a forward sale agreement. So the next stage is that this is a bit of an annoying thing, is that they need to be able to see product that comes out of the plant at the site, but it can just be a small amount. So actually, we can construct the plant almost in its entirety and just run some samples through it, get a representative sample and give that to them. But as soon as we do that, then that contract gets signed. That payment is immediate, and then obviously we would just get going, and they would just take everything off the train once the plant was fully operational and producing. But yeah, there's a forward sale there for us to execute on. And why unless we get a better offer, why not execute on it? It's money up front. It'll help with development. It'll help with paying for things, and we can just recoup that over time with shipments to them. So.
Yeah, and thinking about into the future and infrastructure, what's going to be necessary to refine the ore to the acid spar mark, and how large of a project will that be?
So I jumped this part, but like the acid spar plant, we've actually paid for that in full. So that's actually being fabricated and constructed right now, not at site, but it's being fabricated and all the pieces assembled, and it's going to be shipped to us. And that should arrive in Q3 this year. That plant is a bit more sophisticated than the lumps plant, and they could be complementary as well, depending on how we want to try and meet market needs. But it also is the more expensive product that retails, or the retail selling price. So we could end up producing a lot more with that second plant. And we've tried to optimize it as much as possible to require as few people as possible. So there's some significant updates, even significant updates compared to the plant of the producer who helped us design this, based on their own experience. But that plant will be on site soon. Obviously, we'll announce it and we'll show the pictures of it. But the good part is that contracting firm that's on site at the moment doing the lumps plant construction, all they would do is just move over, and probably a little bit of concurrent activity, but just move over and build that one either simultaneously or after.
So as far as infrastructure land, water, electricity? Is that all in place, or will you need to develop that?
No, I mean we've got the utilities, we've got electric, we've got water. We'll probably widen the water pipe a little bit so the flow is a bit more. But once it's actually fully stocked with water, it's a recirculating system anyway. So it's not like you're dumping water out and then needing a new inflow. And actually, one of the big decisions behind why we chose this industrial estate was because our original industrial estate was going to use city water, and in that part of the world, there's a bit of a restriction on how much water you can utilize from city. But the new area has its own water wells, so it's our own water. So how much we extract is really dependent on our ability to extract it. So we'll widen those pipes a little bit, I think, to accommodate that flotation plant. But everything else, yeah, it's permitted area, it's industrially zoned. In fact, the joke in Delta is that we have a monopoly on industrially zoned land in the area because it's the only industrially zoned land in the area. So we even get companies asking to site on little bits of our land that we're not using in exchange for cash. So that could be an option as well.
Great. James, you won't believe how many questions we have gotten today about the project, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. I want to move on to kind of some of the more technical corporate questions that I received kind of just for our last few minutes. There was a question about Envoy stock. Am I saying that right? Envoy stock.
Oh, yeah.
Some of our shareholders have received their Envoy shares. And there's several questions here asking when those shares will IPO and what the value will be. Can you give us kind of any insight onto that spin out and what?
Yeah. So to be honest, this is not our fault exactly, but like the project in Enyo is actually pretty decent, and we took a similar strategy to ARES, but the shares will only begin to start trading once we start doing work on it. And to be honest, we're so occupied in Utah at the moment, and I'm pretty much living at a mine site. So trying to build two mines at the same time would be a bit of a stretch. So we're kind of holding off on Enyo until this is really in production, and there's a general manager down there that's managing the day-to-day. At that point, we actually would have free time to go and develop the Enyo project. But that might even be an easier one than this one because it's a contiguous block of a certain mineral that's very much in demand by a nearby neighbor. But it will probably list at 10 cents because I think that's what the value the lawyers put on it. But yeah, it's not that it's valueless. It's the fact that we haven't started operations, and so it hasn't started trading. And it will start trading as soon as we start operations. So yeah, I didn't know this would happen this way, but you've got to prioritize certain things, and unfortunately, like this is very important. This is a success, and it'll also make the success of the next project easier. People want to work with groups that succeed, and like this one will. So, and by proxy, our shareholders will win off Enyo when we do get around to it.
Yeah, and just to clarify on that point, that this is kind of a historical legacy thing for the older shareholders. Anybody purchasing shares now or kind of within the last months wouldn't be included in that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was at the time of the spin out. So at the time of the spin out, you basically take the NOBO list, the list of shareholders that have the stock, or even if they're missed, they can apply and they can receive them, and they're issued at the same time. Obviously, we wanted it to be a real dividend for the shareholders, half as well, just being thankful that they're supporting us and they're being patient while we work through COVID and shipping delays and held up federal financings and that sort of stuff. So it was supposed to be a bonus, but it's a bonus that's also been deferred until next year, maybe. So
yeah, well, practice makes perfect.
Yeah, next one will be easier. I unless we have another stupid pandemic, but basically means I have to sneak geologists across borders. So.
You know how to do it this time.
Yeah.
Just a little bit looking into the future. We're really getting short on time, so if you could kind of keep this answer kind of brief. As far as dilution is, do you see there being much more dilution in the stock before you hit profitability?
No, I mean I want this to be the last dilutive financing, and even then, in the long run, it'd be nice to uplist to a bigger exchange in the US as well, and then that will probably mean we'll obviously have to meet the structuring of the Nasdaq, and that might even actually reduce some of the dilution that as you structure it to go onto that kind of firm. But it would obviously be more beneficial for everybody in the long run, and it's something that I think is very likely given the fact that it should be a fairly large company over time, and it should gradually keep building up, and that dilution will obviously come down. Obviously, I always wanted to try and avoid as much dilution as possible, which is why I did the government financings. But I don't really want to do any more. And if everything goes according to plan, then this should be hopefully the last raise we have to do. Now we still need to get that $3 million to get into that ore. So as much as we can do in this, the better. And then that's the end of it. And then we can just get on with running profitable, expanding, nice company that starts off little and becomes big.
There's a question here, kind of lends itself to that. When you get profitable soon, hopefully, do you see the company potentially buying back some of the stock?
Yeah, that could happen. I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. I don't think anybody would object. It depends. Like, you obviously got to weigh up. We can expand in this area to create that additional revenue coming into the company. If there's surplus, then it can go into buying back that stock and then obviously liquidating it and then tightening the structure. It's some tactic. The reason why some people do obviously the stock buyback for the big companies is that to create a smaller float means that you can spike the share price, which is obviously what everyone wants. But the company does it so they can go out to the institutional level and raise a lot more capital. So it almost becomes a choice between raising capital at a much higher share price with a smaller float or bringing in that extra revenue. And the decision needs to be really evaluated at that point. So yeah, we'll see. It obviously we need to play it by ear a little bit, but like I think we all want to see a tighter share structure. We want to see a smaller float, and we obviously want to see that share price pop up. So.
Perfect. And then just kind of our last questions are about communication. There's an acknowledgement that the company's done much better at informing its shareholders in recent months. So we're hoping that continues. And they want also some questions about the July 3rd summit. So you can tell us a little bit about the company's plan to keep shareholders involved and what's involved in the summit. I
don't mind doing any more of these. Actually, these are fine. Like to be honest, sometimes you get so focused into the project that you think, oh God, I've got to tell everybody what's going on. And so we're going to keep the updates coming out. We'll keep the construction photos coming out too, because it's better to see something real. I mean, who cares about a press release where you just write that things are going great? I think pictures tell you a million words. So we'll keep on putting those out. What's the July the 3rd summit like?
So that's an invitation that's going out to all shareholders for a complete update, and there'll be more questions fielded. So yeah, just to let everybody know that everybody will receive an invitation to the July 3rd summit. Yeah. These are going to be done quarterly, as well as the month-to-month ones we're doing to new investors. So James, that's about all the time we have for today. So I want to thank you very much. And just to remind anybody, if we didn't get around to asking your question to James, you will receive a response within the next couple of days. So we appreciate everybody's time today. Please keep those questions coming to the company. Keep getting engaged with us on social media. We do love to see your comments and your encouragement. So thank you very much. Thank you, James. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in. So.
That's great. James, Carl, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening and for updating investors. Can I please ask investors not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of ARES Strategic, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation.